All right, so we are officially recording for our Hangout on July 14th. And, uh-oh, why wouldn't it let me do that? So today you were asked to, one second, it looks like you were asked to do the coin flip experiment. But really the focus we were hoping for originally was that you would focus on the Explore task today. So there was a short little video that was just a little introduction overview of the Explore task that was hosted by the online team, about 23 minutes or so. So I hope that you were able to watch that. And we asked that you reviewed the Explore 1, which is the practice, our mobile CSP practice for the Explore performance task, and then the official Explore task, which is the one that's submitted to the College Board. There's a new rubric, so the rubric you should have been using is labeled Draft from June 2016. And we provided you with 5 student samples directly from the College Board and asked you to grade 2 of them. So does anybody object to me putting up the scores that you gave for each of the samples? I know your names are up there. I can hide your names if you would like, if there's any objection.
Nah, no objection from me. You can put mine up.
Put mine up.
Yeah, put them up.
So I think it would be easier if you do object to anybody seeing your name to the scores you gave, say, I object. Going once.
Maybe better in the chat.
Going twice. 3 times. All right, so I heard an object. All right, so I can hide your names and go from there. So give me a second. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a screen share. And I am going to sort these real quick. All right, so we had, looks like everybody, we have some that's grade student A, B, C, D, and E. It's pretty even distribution there, which is great. It's not that everybody graded the same 2, which is pretty nice. So you can see here kind of the differences that were going on. So even if we look at like sample A, there were 4s and 8s. Ralph did point out that what was missing from the original form was the option to choose a 0. It's in the back. Yeah. So that option isn't there. If you put in the comment that you had chosen a 0, I changed that. We have to turn that on. Sorry, Ralph's trying to put you up on the big screen so he can see you. So it is okay to give a 0. I'm not sure if that was something that you guys were wondering or thinking. It was just a mistake when we were making the form that we did not include 0 as an option. If you go back and look at the form now, it is there. And again, if you put in the comment that you really were giving it a 0, I did change it to reflect that. So we're looking at just like sample A. If you can see my screen, if you're looking at sample A, it looks like it was all 4s and 8s, assuming that nobody wanted to change their score to be a 0. So if you looked at sample A, does anybody kind of want to give maybe like a snapshot of what they were thinking?
Why don't we all look it through A together, because some people won't have seen it now.
Yeah.
Just see what the person submitted. Probably won't take long to read quickly through it. Or maybe someone can walk us through who did A.
So this is sample A, the written responses. It was an app called Pulse Point. So does anybody who graded A want to give a sample explanation? And why am I not hearing you guys anymore? Are you guys still there?
So I graded this one, and I think I might have given it an 8, but I think I was struggling in grading it and fully understanding what it was looking for, because looking at it again, I think I would probably go more towards a 4 than an 8. But I don't know, it's kind of hard to understand how to grade this, and I think I should have gone through the rubric a little bit more fine-tooth before I read this. Well, I went through it, but when I read this, it seemed different to me, or it was harder to connect the two, I guess.
And Pauline, 2A doesn't matter in, they don't grade anything to do with 2A, right? It looks like the rubric just focuses on 2B, 2C, 2D, 2E, and the computer artifact, right? Computational artifact?
I want to say yes. So I think, if you were writing this like an essay, it's sort of, they were just looking for an intro to be in the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Isn't that the first part, row 1? Isn't that part of the description? So doesn't it focus on? Isn't that inside the rubric?
I thought the first row had to do with the computer artifact, computational artifact, and if they did like audio or describe that during when they created the computational artifact. But maybe you're right. Row 1 maybe has to do with both the description and what they created to go along with this.
Yeah, it says in the rubric that row 1, they're to look at 1 and 2A. So a combination of the actual artifact itself as well as the write-up on it. Because...
Gotcha. Okay. Because I know some people, one other one I saw, some people did more of a description in the actual artifact, but I guess you can combine the two.
Yeah, it's definitely a better way to get a 12, because you'll see in category 4, it's in the or statement whether or not the artifact and the response are clearly differentiated from one another.
Gotcha. Cool.
So for me, I guess I'm finding it interesting that it's calling it background information.
Where are you looking?
This sample, it's 2A.
I was looking at the rubric, sorry.
Right. So I'm thinking I think it seems a little bit confusing that it's using the subtitle 2A, background information, when in the actual like the written descriptions for the task, it's called 2A, computational artifact.
Yeah, so that's something that we can tell our students to make sure we clearly label this. To me, I think that in order to score a 12 on this, is you should be able to look at the computer, the artifact, and be able to identify its purpose just on itself, right? And then the write-up can supply the part of the rubric that says richness of detail, breadth of scope, and creative expression.
So according to the, according to what the students should have written for Part A, they should name the computing innovation that's represented by the computational artifact, describe its intended purpose and function, and describe how your computational artifact illustrates, represents, or explains the computing innovation's intended purpose, its function or effect. So it doesn't mention their artifact here at all in 2A, does it? Which it's supposed to do, right?
So,
It does identify the name and purpose of the innovation.
right.
Also. But it doesn't mention C, describe how your computational artifact illustrates, represents, or explains. At least that's not done in 2A. And 2A is row 1 of the rubric. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. So I think right now what might be helpful is, you know, if you have open the actual Explore 2 task. So if I go to the pacing guide, I'm not sure what you have in front of you, but if you go to the Explore 2 in the pacing guide,
And then open the rubric.
and then from there, you can get to the official task, which is here. So we'll open that up. And you can open up the rubric from right there. It's also linked in the pacing guide as well. And if you open them up, you know, maybe side by side, and then what I'll do is I'll put up the actual task, the sample on the board here. But have these two open so you know what was expected, what was the prompt. Right, this is what Ralph was just reading, 2A. And then have the rubric open so you see what they're looking for. And I will have open on my screen right now the sample that we're looking at.
So I don't see any way to give this a 12 at least. Those who graded it, if you agree with that, that probably isn't a 12. Because it doesn't mention the artifact at all in the description. The way I'm reading it, it has to mention the artifact in the description of the, right?
Right, and it says extensive knowledge of the artifact or of the innovation that you researched, and I don't think this really reflects extensive knowledge.
But they only have 100 words, so I'm guessing that's not too many, that's around 100 words there, is it?
I don't think that's 100.
Yeah, Ralph, I have to agree with you because there is no richness, detail, or breadth of scope, although those are very undefinable terms.
Right.
Artifact is primarily non-textual, and it does simply state the intended purpose, function, or its effects with the write-up and the artifact control. So together, I mean, so I don't think it's clearly in personally. And if we're all in agreement, then maybe we can look at another, I don't know if it'd be helpful to look at 2A on multiple students back to back so we can see them, or unless you had intended going all through student A, all through student B.
Might be easier just in terms of managing the information to go all through one at a time.
So what I thought might be useful is to go through one completely together, and then show you the commentary from the College Board, right? Because you haven't seen that yet. You haven't seen what it was actually given.
Yeah, good idea. So should we move on to row 2 then?
So are we saying this would get a 4, a 0, 4, 8, or 12?
Well, I think,
What do you think?
let's take a look at their computational artifact.
Okay. Okay, so it's up on the screen.
It does seem to be primarily non-textual and conveying computing innovation. It's an app, or what is it?
I mean, I don't know what the idea behind the artifact, but this is something anyone could have pretty much done in 15, 20 minutes, right? It's just a bunch of screenshots and some descriptive labels. It doesn't really explain to me, you know, by just looking at it, what the innovation does, how it's innovative, how it's new, and how it's different.
It almost looks to me like it's a storyboard showing screenshots of the app itself.
What about row 2?
So that's where 2A comes in, though. Isn't 2A supposed to be the written part to support the artifact and explain what's going on?
2A seems to describe the artifact, right? But it doesn't even mention it in the response.
So just a request, if you're not speaking, can you please mute yourself? Thank you. All right. Not sure that's going on. So I'm just going to mute everybody, and then if you would like to speak, make sure that you unmute. So everybody's muted. If you want to speak, just unmute.
All right, so go back to the right there, right, the student, right.
Why is this at the top?
I know it's-
And I see things in the chat, but I can't read it. What are we looking for?
The student submission.
Wait, the written
Yeah,
responses?
they're written. So 2A clearly does not mention the artifact, as far as I can tell. What about 2B? 2B is supposed to describe your development process, explicitly identifying the computing tools and techniques you use to create your artifact. Your description must be detailed enough so the person unfamiliar with these tools will understand your process. So what is the artifact actually? It looks like an app, but is it just screenshots of the app on some kind of image?
That's what it looks like.
So can you guys pull up the PDF of the grading rubric really quickly?
Yep.
And then can you zoom in and let's take a look at this really quickly, because the language in this, and I apologize if somebody had talked about this, but I kind of want to go over this. So if we're saying computational artifact, that's the thing that they produced, right? That's the Google Doc with the images on it. That's a computational artifact. And then when it says of the computing innovation, the actual app is the computing innovation, but the artifact is the Google Doc with the screenshots on it. Is that everyone else's understanding of it?
Yes.
And then, okay.
Yes.
Okay. And then when it says, where does it say it? There's if we look at in this, in row 1, the 12 cell of task 1, semicolon 2A says the computational artifact is primarily non-textual and conveys the computing innovation's intended purpose. And then underneath it says the response identifies the computing tools and describes multiple integrated steps in their development process. And that's where I'm getting snagged up. Does their development process mean the human being who made it, or does it mean the computing tools developmental process?
It means the student process of creating that artifact.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure, because
Which hasn't, as far as I can tell, been described. We still don't really know what it is, right?
Yeah, so I think that this one is a little bit harder because it's about their innovation is an app, right? Whereas it's not something like they did Google Glass or Bluetooth or something like that.
A mobile app.
It's a
on
mobile
iOS,
app,
iOS
right?
app.
And they had to make some computing artifact to talk about what they had researched and the effects of this innovation, in this case, the app that they had researched, right? In other cases we've seen, you'll get to see some examples from the Mobile CSP course, but we've seen, things like Bluetooth, GPS, Google Glass. I think it's just a little bit harder to understand this because of they chose an app as their innovation, and B, they did screenshots for that artifact. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
But they do identify how they did the screenshots. It says that they did it with iOS 5 and they transferred it with OneDrive and that they put it into a Word document.
So their artifact is a Microsoft Word document.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think we should spend too much time on each one because we do want to get sort of an overall high-level picture of these. Can someone who actually assessed this one walk us through the remaining parts? And then we can move on to look at the College Board's assessment and move on and look at another one. Anyone, did any of you look at this one and give it a grade? It doesn't matter. Don't be shy. I mean, this is all just sort of so new. Don't feel defensive about whatever grade you gave it.
We're all learning.
We're all just trying to learn what's going on here.
So I'll walk through. I did this one. I don't remember which scores I gave, but on the first one, I actually started off thinking that the app was designed by the student, that they made the graphics. I think it confused me a bit. So I'm going to skip talking about that. But the developmental process, I think I put that they either were at full points because they described the steps that they did. And if you look at the rubric, it says, describe how you create this artifact. And so I thought it was kind of a weak thing, but I thought that they had explained the process that they had done. And so I thought it hit the rubric on that. And then effects on society. It does mention both positive and negative effects on it. And so I think I did put that in there. Let me look at the rubric real quick to see. I put on there.
Yeah, I could definitely see both positive and negative there.
Yeah, I think I had to go back and reread it just to make sure that it was clear. I don't remember what score I gave it, but I basically just went through and read to see that I saw both.
Uh-huh.
And when I saw both, I probably gave it.
It doesn't really matter what you gave it.
Yeah, I can't even remember. I did this yesterday, so I can't remember my responses. But this one was kind of hard for me to go through, though, because I kept doing something, and then I wasn't sure if I was understanding it correctly. And then at the references at the end, it says 3 complete references, so I just went and counted the references, and then I gave the points there for row 5.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I did it correctly, but that's kind of the process that I went through, is looking and trying to find where the words were and which part of the rubric.
It does look like they gave a decent discussion of the data. And that 2D. They did identify how the data is.
Oh, right. I skipped over that. Sorry. So, yeah, they explained what was actually happening there.
Okay. 3 complete references have been provided in Part E. So the references in this case are news articles, the Baltimore Sun, WRIC news story. And
Did I read somewhere that those references need to have live links if they're web pages?
Oh, I don't know.
I thought I read something like that too, but I thought it was a suggestion. I didn't know if it was a requirement to be live links.
Yeah, so inside the written instructions, the prompts for references 2E, for each online source, include the permanent URL, identify the author, title, source, the date, and then if possible, the date the reference was written or posted. Include citation for the sources you use, number each source accordingly. Each source must be relevant, credible, and easily accessed.
But looking at the rubric, it just says, were there 3?
I gave that a 2 because it doesn't specifically mention where it says cited and attributed within the text. They didn't re-reference their reference saying, I found this information here in their write-up. So
I propose now we look at the College Board's assessment.
That's a good idea.
Can you pull it up, Pauline?
One more thing. Does a picture count as a reference if they source it? If they got it from like Google or something?
It could, I think. An image, you mean what?
Yeah, they did a Google search and found a picture, and then they sourced where they got it and all that. But just a single picture doesn't seem worthwhile for a document.
Well, they would need an explanation of the pictures. They would have to, take that picture and then explain what it is. If they just put a picture for like a cover page and cite it, in no way is it enhancing your paper. So I wouldn't count that as a valid resource. But if it was a flow chart of a design process and they said, looking at, figure 1.1, the first step in the design process is X, then it becomes a valid resource because they're actually discussing it.
Does somebody know what the difference is between cited and attributed?
I thought attributed and cited were the same thing. That's what I interpreted them as.
Because in the rubric, it's an or, cited or attributed. I thought it meant it needed to be referred to in the answer so that you know what the citation refers to or how it's relevant to the answer.
Yes, I believe you do need to put citations in the text. So you need to have 3 references listed at the bottom as well as have some sort of either superscript or footnoted number within your write-up that links to those references. That's my understanding from the College Board.
That's what I think makes sense.
Pauline has put up the College Board's assessment of this. So for the first one, it received 8 points because the artifact is primarily non-textual. It's a Word doc and conveys the pulse point medical alerts of the intended purpose of lowering the response time for qualified individuals. I agree. It did not earn 12 points because the text and screenshots lack effective communication through richness of detail, breadth of scope, or creative expression. So even though it's a Word doc, I guess the fact that it has screenshots, pictures in it, means it's non-textual primarily. So, okay, got 8 points for that. What about the next category? 6 points because it identifies, now 6 is the column B, column 2. It identifies and describes screenshots in Word as the computing tools and multiple integrated steps to transform, import, and resize images. It does not earn 9 points because it does not describe how any choices of techniques or features of tools enable the artifact to highlight aspects of pulse point.
That one's confusing. So they're saying because he cut and paste, but I didn't cut and paste to highlight this picture for this one reason. That's the difference between a 9 and a 12. Like you have to say why the student chose that particular picture to cut and paste.
If you look at the picture, because I actually agreed with the College Board on this one. If you looked at the pictures, there really weren't description as to what the pictures were showing or what they were doing. They were very vague, and I feel that's kind of what they're talking about. It wasn't, the artifact was there, but again, the description of what the artifact was or what it was showing is the point that was lacking on the artifact.
So the rubric says that, I think the part it's referring to in this is the response identifies how the specific features of the computing tools enable the creation of an appropriate illustration, representation, or explanation of the computing.
Like him saying why he used Word, right? Or like why he used that particular artifact.
I guess. Yeah. So it didn't address that. So then row 3, it earned 10 points, which again is in the middle, because it identifies quick response as a benefit and explains saving lives as an impact. I can't read the rest.
Sorry, I'm still trying to accommodate people who are in the chat.
The potential harmful effect of attracting onlookers is identified. However, the response did not earn 15 points because the impact this has on society is not clear. It just says in the, I'm reading, going back and reading the student's response, all it says about the impact is the pulse point has the potential to have a large effect on society as a whole. That's the first sentence. But I don't know. These are hard. And then what about the last one, row 4? The response earned 12 points, which I assume is full credit, right? Yep, because it identifies 911 dispatch information as data used by pulse point. So it did well on that one. And then for the last one, it only earned 2 points because it provides 3 resources. 3 sources it did not earn. No, that's the middle amount. 2 is the middle. Did not earn 3 points because the sources are not cited within the text of the response. So the rubric says 3 complete references have been provided. All references have been cited or attributed within the text. Okay, so that's pretty clear, that column 3 there. Yeah?
When you're done, I want to point out something. You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not sure if you have your handy dandy purple booklets, your AP course and exam description booklet, but I want to point out a couple of things here. So starting on page 72, 72, you have some guidelines, okay? So you have your roles as a teacher are outlined, what you should be doing when you are administering this task in your classroom. The number one thing is making sure you give 8 hours of classroom time. But if you keep looking through, there are things that the teacher should and shouldn't do as far as guidelines. And then there's task guidelines for the student on page 75. So these talk about what should be included specifically as far as referring to written responses, relevant, credible, easily accessible sources, required to cite at least 3 sources that help them create their computational artifact and or formulate their responses. 2 sources must be available online or in print. And then it goes on to talk about avoiding plagiarism, and then citing sources, including a bibliography, but it says citing sources throughout their responses and including a bibliography. And then sources that should be cited include text, images, graphs, program code used in creation of their computational artifacts. So again, this starts on page 72 in that booklet, and then page 75 has specific guidelines for the student. In the back of the book, it has the reproducible handouts that you can give to the students so they know what the guidelines are and what they should and shouldn't be doing. I also want to call your attention to page 42 in the booklet, page 42. This is under instructional approaches. So it talks about citing sources and how to cite. So it actually says in here, you know, the different formats that they can use. They can use an MLA, APA. They give more direction throughout throughout this part and what the evaluation of the sources mean. I just lost. They were explaining that, we knew this kind of without having the text to prove it. We knew that they had to be recent sources. So it looked like the student, if you noted, had 2015 and 2016 resources. And I believe I just lost the place in here, but it's in there between those pages, like 42 and 43, saying that they need to have 2 that were within the last year, but I just lost my place with where that was exactly. But it is in there. And so this, again, to reiterate that Explorer 1 is the practice, your scaffolding and providing them with this information on how to gather, collect, and cite sources so that way they can do it on their own for Explorer 2. But the book, I suggest reading through those pages so you can get some more background information about what they're looking for, because they are explicitly telling the student what to do and what you to do as a teacher.
Pauline, what you're looking for, this is Tony, what you're looking for is on page 75, and it's in the last paragraph. It says, students are required to cite at least 3 sources that help them create their artifact. At least 2 of the sources must be available online or in print, the third, and then at least 2 of the sources must have been created after the end of the previous academic years.
Excellent, thank you.
And it makes clear that they have to be cited within the written response, not at the end as a bunch of bibliography.
Both, they need both. It says both, it explicitly said both.
Okay.
Throughout the responses and a bibliography.
So I think we should look at another one because we're running short, going to run short on time here. Does anyone want to propose one that we look at together? We're obviously not going to have time to look at them all.
Can we look at the one with the rift glasses? I think it was the last one, E, I think, or maybe it was C.
No, it was E, you're right. I was just taking a peek at it.
What confused me here is the artifact part, because he or she made this out of cardboard and then took a picture of it. And it's a model of a Rift system goggles. I couldn't figure out what was the artifact here. It was a little twisted.
My understanding of that was that the artifact itself is just the Word document with the pictures. If we're still going along that, like, yeah, he made a model of it, but that's not that's all analog, right? Like he made that all. It's impressive that he went to that length, but maybe he just didn't understand.
So actually, this looks like this person actually created something beyond the document that the other one did. The other one was a Word document with some screenshots. This person actually built a model. Apparently, and when you look through it, apparently you do see something that he's put inside of it, right?
But is the model a computational artifact because it's all done with how he describes it's cut out of cardboard and then a hand-drawn picture inside the goggles.
Right. So
computational artifact.
If you look at page 44 in the book, it will tell you what it means to create a computational artifact. And again, there's a whole page there telling you about what students should do. So a computational artifact is a visualization, a graphic, a program, a video, or an audio that students create using a computer. So good point, good catch.
This is the one that I asked you to add the 0 to, because I gave him a 0 because it is not created with a computer. So, but it could be argued that it is just like the first one was a Word document with screen captures on it. Maybe I thought that first one, the student made the app, but I mean, putting pictures on a Word document, I don't think suffices as a computational artifact. That's just documenting, right? So
even the first one you're saying doesn't count? The first one?
Well, no, I didn't feel that when I looked at the first one just now, so I'm kind of guessing my own justification. I'm thinking maybe my interpretation was that the student actually made that app.
So I'm wondering.
Oh, no, they didn't make
No,
that.
they didn't.
Yeah, well, I don't think I graded that one. So I just like through this conversation. So like I said, this to me is a 0 because this artifact is the Oculus Rift because that's what he writes about the entire time.
What did he
I
write
think
about?
you're probably right.
The other one they talked about the innovation. So the artifact is not the Word document. The artifact is the cardboard structure that the student made. So that's why I end up giving him a 0 for the first row 1 and 2.
I agree. So
they didn't use computing tools to create this.
if he had done this on a 3D printer and, designed the model, then it would be a computational artifact.
I agree.
Yes.
Okay, so we're all on the same page, I think.
To offer a different perspective.
See, I was going to say, I don't like that 3D computer artifact because I feel that's a disadvantage thing. I mean, I have a 3D printer, but I know not all schools do, nor would a student taking this class necessarily have access to it either. And so to say that a 3D printed model, which is a physical thing, counts as a computational, but if you build your mock-up out of something else, it's not.
Right, but Nick, doesn't he have to use AutoCAD or something
And
to
either they both count or they shouldn't both count.
Well, one is made with a computer, like you said. You had to use AutoCAD, and then you had to save it as an STL file and set that up on the tray and all that.
Then I would say the computer model, pictures of the computer model count, not the physical printout. If all I get is a picture of the physical printout, that's equivalent to this. If I get pictures from CAD with their 3D model, yes, then that counts as computational.
The way you justify it, I agree, but I will tell you that we talked about this at the College Board training, and someone did suggest, what if this was 3D printed? And the person who was running it didn't grade the Explorer, but we were led to believe that if it was 3D printed, it would make a difference. But I hear what you're saying.
How about if we jump ahead and look at the scoring for this one? The College Board's, was it E? This is E, I think.
I have to zoom back in, sorry. Scrolling, there it is. Wow, ouch.
0-0. So I think we're all in consensus on the first two, right? Not a computational artifact. Does not identify any computing tools.
I have to disagree. He does say that he took pictures and he did something. What do you give somebody who does nothing and doesn't submit an artifact?
I think I'm with Van on this one.
-2.
So you think the person should get a 1 or a 2? The minimum in row 1 is, the maximum in row 1 is.
4 to 12.
Are we supposed to just give the incremental amounts?
Yeah.
Hey, Pauline.
Yes.
I think the giveaway for this one is the student's answer to row 2. Because in row 2, and I know not everyone read this one or whatever, but I was just looking through as all these debates were going on.
Mm-hmm.
In row 2, the student talks about the computational artifact is the cardboard. And that's why I think it automatically wipes out any points he could have gotten for 0 or for A. Because if he would have said the computational artifact is my Word document, that's a computational artifact of pictures and other stuff, no different than the first one. But the fact that he says his computational artifact is the cardboard model, that eliminates A and B for me. I mean, row 1 and row 2, however you want to say that.
So once again, the AP becomes a test on reading directions and nothing to do with what the kid does.
In large part, I think you're right about that. That's how graders are going to approach it.
Then what's the point?
So for me, I'm seeing this as, this is the explore task, and it was meant, originally, we were seeing these old versions years ago of this. It was meant originally to be a written research paper about the internet. And it slowly evolved into, picking just any computing innovation and writing about that computing innovation. And then they decided to add in this computational artifact to see, could the students create something on the computer? So they're looking for them to create, they're taking this computer science course and they're learning about these programming tools. Could they create something on the computer to demonstrate what they had been learning about? But as you can see, I think there's more weight here on these written responses that are not involving the artifact in a way, right? So there are three other responses. I mean, look at number 3. Row 3, look at the weights of the categories, 5, 10, and 15. The heavily weighted one is about explaining the beneficial and harmful effects. That really has always been the focus of this task, even as it's evolved over the years. So this one really was meant more so to be something about writing and research than it was to develop something. The development was more so focused in the create task, but that's when they were assessing development.
So yeah, I also, if you go back to can you put up the prompts for this, Pauline? If you read this prompt right here, computational artifact, your computational artifact must provide an illustration, representation, or explanation. So this is clearly a representation of the innovation, right? It's a 3D model.
Absolutely.
And of its intended purposes, function, or its effect. The computational artifact must not simply repeat the information supplied and should be primarily non-textual. So is the computational artifact the 3D model or the picture of the 3D model, which is in a text document similar to the first one we looked at? Right? This kid didn't have an Oculus to take screenshots from and put in a Word doc. So he or she built the 3D model of it, took pictures of it, and put it in a Word doc or PDF. So, it's just not terribly clear. But I see Kristen's point, and I see the College Board saying, no, it's not computational. Well, it does involve a little bit of computational tools in the sense that it's a PDF.
Yeah, but if the student wanted to describe his computational
line of this prompt, submit a video, audio, or PDF file. Use computing tools and techniques to create one original computational article, a visualization, graphic, video, or audio recording. So this is a visualization or a graphic of a 3D model that the person built. So,
except that the student says, my computational artifact is the cardboard. If he said my computational artifact are these pictures of an Oculus Rift, that's one thing.
I guess. That's good. But that's
it clearly says,
right?
But then it would have been graded similar to the other one with the screenshots, right?
What if he'd drawn a picture of it and taken a picture of that and submitted it?
Could he have designed it in Photoshop?
I'm just saying, it's like splitting hairs here to see one of those as an 8 and the other as a 0 when one took screenshots of an existing app and put them in a Word doc, and the other built something by hand, took pictures of it and then put it in a Word doc.
I agree. A 2-minute search on Google Images, you find a picture of an Oculus, you get an 8, but he actually takes time to build one, he gets a 0. That just doesn't seem fair.
Not only that, if the rubric is allowing you to put a 0 in, let's define what a 0 is, okay? So when we give this rubric to the teachers, they can do it right.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing the create task at the College Board, and my recollection, which is not perfect, is zeros were for cases where nothing was even submitted.
That makes sense to me.
What I find surprising is that they allocated 8 hours to do this. I mean, all these projects it seems, would not have taken 8 hours. I find that surprising.
Well, maybe, these aren't getting great scores, though, are they? Did either one of these get a good score?
Is it 8 hours of class time? Could they do work at home?
Class time, I think.
That's a minimum, 8 hours of class time, because you could also have worked on this at home. There's nothing ruling that out. Did anyone come across a really good one that got good marks that we should look at? Both of these have had, issues they fell well short of perfect in the College Board's eyes, at least, and in ours. Did anyone of those 5 come out very high that somebody would like to propose we take a quick look at?
Well, D was rated 34. We have the ratings in the teach side, if you want to look through them.
Should we take a quick look at D?
Are you paying attention to the chat as well? There's things going up in the chat.
I haven't done it.
So sorry, can we just take a moment to acknowledge that there are people chatting and asking
Go
stuff?
ahead, you do it.
I mean, I just want to point it out, but I don't know if you get all the scores down the first column, is that consistent with the 3, second column 4, third column equals 5? I'm not sure what that's asking.
Oh, so that's asking, when you get your AP score, what, I mean.
No. The AP score is a combination of what you score in the Explore, what you score on the Create, and your final exam. They all get factored in together. The percentages are listed in your book.
This is worth 16% of your overall score.
Create
Right.
24%, and your exam is 60%. So they take all the scores from there, put them together, and then they're going to develop an AP score from that. It does not directly correspond with their final score.
I think Nick is saying the same point I was making about that, if you read that prompt carefully, this looks like it meets the criteria that should not get a 0.
So,
what else did Nick say?
Let me just ask that question again. So if a kid asks me, hey, I want to get a 5 on everything, what do I need to get on the rubric for the Explore to be consistent with my 5 overall? I would just say do your best.
yeah, I mean, if you get a perfect score or close to a perfect score in everything, we don't know exactly in the end what the cutoff is going to be for a 5 versus a 4 on the final score. We just know that it's going to count towards a certain percentage.
Okay.
So Nick is raising socioeconomic equity issue here, which I think is important to look at. So he's saying, I'll put it in bald terms. You have one kid who has an iPhone, who got an app on his iPhone, took some screenshots of it, put it in a Word doc. And you have another kid who may not have an iPhone, but read online about Oculus, created a model of it, took pictures of it, and put it in a Word doc. What's the difference in these? That one should get an 8 and one should get, and not only an 8, an 8 plus whatever they got on the second one versus zeros on both. It seems pretty harsh to me. I would tend to agree with Nick that there's more going on here than we've been able to address, that those examples address.
I still think the write-up is I've been teaching, I teach calc and stats, and a lot of times if you don't answer the question asked, you're going to get yourself in trouble, especially with AP stats. And it sounds like, I haven't taught AP, the AP Comp Sci, but it sounds like the written response is what demolished his grade. Because he didn't, his description of his computational artifact was a piece of cardboard. That's not the computational artifact.
Right, I understand the same thing. So for instance, if he had taken the picture and then applied some labels to it, or dressed up the actual Word document with some kind of a technology that he used and then talked about that, I think he would have gotten a high score. It wasn't about the artifact itself. It was about what he decided was his artifact, and I think he made the wrong choice there.
Yeah, if he would have used, literally, you take the exact same write-up from the first one we read, talking about Word and the cut and paste tool, whatever he did, and put that into this one, I think both of those would have been an 8. That's just my opinion. I'm not the AP grader, but.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but your opinion's important because we're gonna be trying to guide students into what they should create for these.
Yeah, for me, same way I do with calculus and with stats, answer the question asked. They ask about your computational artifact, you better be mentioning what you did on the computer.
So I think this is where, Explore 1 is going to be super important with scaffolding the students and making sure that you as teachers know what the students should be doing so you can give them the correct information. So I don't want to point fingers, but I almost feel a little bit bad because the ones who completed it this year were the pilot instructors, right? So these are samples from the pilot instructors, and it's like when the pilot instructors did their sample task, what were they telling their students was acceptable, right? Were they really following what was mentioned here as far as, it needed to be computational and coming down to something like a visualization, a graphic, a video, or audio recording. So I just want to make sure that you guys are really into this discussion and really reading the materials you have to know what the College Board is asking for. I think it's, we have our opinions about, how they might or should change it and can give our feedback. But the reality is this is what they're asking for this year, right? Until they, unless they announce otherwise. And we should try to make sure that the students have an understanding of what they're looking for.
So in this particular case, if the student had said, the artifact that I made, I'm just going to reword it with 2 words. The artifact that I made to represent my computing innovation is a picture of a Word document with pictures of a 3D model that I built of an Oculus. That would have been perfect?
No, that would have been better though.
Yeah.
That would have been like at least 8 points, right? Because that's all the first person submitted and got 8 points. A picture of something, screenshot.
Yep.
Well, he described how he cut and paste and how he used the computer to make that artifact.
Mm-hmm.
But it does seem like the best way to score well on 1 and 2 is to do a little video of your app.
No, not necessarily. So they even say in the booklet, to have teachers should encourage students to think outside of traditional means for communicating their ideas. So typically, traditional might be a Word document or a PowerPoint. Their students should be steered toward more creative avenues, and it gives some examples there in the guidelines on page 44 of some examples of things that they might be creating. So these are all acceptable examples. So they're an advertising campaign that they make, promotional materials, a song, or a video commercial. That's the first one. But that would be used on, completed on using a computing tool. They can make an educational tutorial or a book, or online book, or a program that teaches students, a public service announcement, or an infographic related to data and social media would have been a good example. So they're all stressing things that are computational, but they want them to be creative too. Remember, one of the big ideas here is creativity.
Yeah. So let's take a quick look at D. D was the one that someone proposed as a good one, which apparently the artifact in that case is a video that the student created using screenshots and produced a voiceover. That clearly is non-textual, and it's a considerable amount of work to put that construct that artifact, right? So when I first saw this, I thought maybe it's just an uploaded video. But
the intended purpose of the Google self-driving car is to provide a new means of transportation for the general public, one that operates without a human driver, as well as operating more safely than a human driver. With the Google.
Yeah, so this is not a video that was taken offline, and this is a video that the student created. So that probably gets high marks, I would guess. And
That only got an 8.
Only got an 8. So let's look at the scores for this one. Why did it just get an 8?
So first looking at his prompts, talks about Windows Movie Maker, and then with a voiceover.
So did it get an 8 just on 2A?
This is D, right?
This is D, yeah.
A 6 on the second row. It got medium on both.
It did not earn 12 points on row 1 because it does not add any richness of detail or breadth of scope, and there is some repetition of what is in the written response. Row 2 did not earn 9 points because it does not describe how any choices of techniques or features of tools enable to the artifact to highlight aspects of the self-driving car. So it's like, yes, they did what they were supposed to, but then it came down to the written response. Right, so it's two different parts there.
And got really dinged on part 3, only 5 points out of 15, right?
That's the meat of the explore task, is writing about the beneficial and harmful effects. We were even told that be careful about using the word hacking. Be careful about using the word hacking. So we have somebody in the chat. I'm not sure about whose voice. Was it his voice? I think it was his voice, right? He said use voiceover.
Sounded like a computer voice to me.
Computer voice?
So on that one there, I actually had a question about the citing of artifacts, because he had a bunch of images that he just Googled, and he didn't cite those, but it looks like they gave him a score 3 on that out of 3. And so he cites things, but all of those images he just Googled and they're not cited here. And so that's a question I have is, do you get dinged for just taking somebody's image off the internet and just saying, hey, here's this image?
Well, according to this, no.
Right. Because I gave it low marks because it was just a bunch of stuff from the internet, but not cited. And I followed all the links and none of those pictures were there. So
what did they get? What did they get on the last one? Did they get a perfect? Row 5?
3.
That's perfect. Yeah.
All 3 references are complete and cited in the text.
Yeah, I read this. I read the student's one, and he had, within text sightings, here's where I used reference 2, here's where I used reference 3, etc.
Yeah.
Like a research paper.
He just had lots of images that he didn't cite where he got them from. He just Googled them.
That was only in the video.
So this is interesting, yeah, because page 71, it has in your booklet, AP Computer Science Principles Policy on Plagiarism. I'm going to read what it says. A student who fails to acknowledge through citation, through attribution, by reference, and or through acknowledgement in a bibliographic entry, the source or author of any and all information or evidence taken from the work of someone else will receive a score of 0 on that particular component of the performance assessment task.
And so that's how I looked at it on that one, is they have stuff in there that's not theirs and they don't cite it. So I thought that would have got a 0, not a 3.
Interesting. Good point. Good point. Good point.
I think we're getting a sense of just how difficult it is going to be to grade these things, but equally how difficult it is going to be to give students good advice on creating.
I think that it would be a 0 for the entire portion of the thing. That would have been 30 points off. Right?
It says 0 for that particular component.
Yeah, plagiarism, so that would be just for the artifact?
Well, in this particular case, I just Googled Google car, and I went to any images that are labeled for reuse, and every one of those images that he used are labeled under the section labeled for reuse.
Well, this is an interesting thing to think of too, is for the Explorer, are the readers grading these on a computer? Do they have
No,
access
they do.
to a computer?
You do not have, you're not allowed to go and look stuff up during grading.
So they wouldn't even have access to that to
You
check.
have to just make a judgment based on what you presented.
Now,
So we just have to make it look good.
they're taken?
Huh?
Do these pictures look like pictures the student could have taken themselves?
No, but I agree that this, I would say the student should have mentioned in his write-up that these were images. So it just says stills. It should say publicly available stills or openly licensed stills or something like that.
In the write-up or in the artifact itself? He could have made that his last slide.
Oh, I think I was thinking in the write-up.
Because we're then taking away from the 100 words we're allowed to use.
Yeah, but I think that's important. If it does say plagiarism is an issue,
so
you could get you a 0 if you use images that aren't publicly licensed.
Right. So in 2B, that talks about the development process. And in your book on page 45, they actually give you some steps outlined there of what the development process is. So, you know, if you're doing Explorer 1, you can kind of talk to your students about, these are the kind of things you can think about. You know, at what stage did you investigate? Did you plan? Did you design? Did you create, evaluate, document? And saying, and giving details about where you got all of these resources from, right? So I would say that includes, I went into Google, I did this search. My understanding though is that the word limit is what's suggested, because you don't want to give the readers they're going to be grading all these. You don't want to have something that's really, really long. So they have to give some type of word limit. But from what I heard from Shinma as well and from others is that the word limit, if you go a little bit over, it's not that big of a deal, right? The readers aren't going to be, they're not going to be counting word for word. They're not going to be on the computer researching and trying to figure out how many words are there. And they're not going to be counting word for word how many words you use. It's just an estimate for them so that way they're not sitting there reading 10-page papers.
Yeah, you know, I mean, okay, so may I propose that we put this on the agenda for tomorrow again, because we haven't even gotten a chance to talk about their create task.
We need to assign them pairs.
Tomorrow, for tomorrow?
Because, so the create 2, you should be...
tomorrow we need to do that.
You're going to do it tomorrow?
Well, we don't have time now. It's
Okay.
4:15.
All right. So Ralph is saying tomorrow. So just a heads up for the create 2, you'll be assigned new pairs and starting with new ideas, and you'll be expected to brainstorm and come up with an elevator pitch sometime tomorrow or over the weekend. And when you come in on Monday, you'll be delivering your elevator pitches in person.
But I want to, well, we should see what would be better. Would it be better to spend some time tomorrow continuing this discussion and also discussing the create task you did, or when you're here in person next week, finding another hour to spend on this?
On going over sample grading?
Going over finishing up this discussion and also looking at the create task and sample
It
grading.
is in the schedule for Monday morning when we come in to have another discussion face to face.
Okay. So that might be the best way to do it. We'll just continue this discussion and also talk about the create task on Monday. Does that sound good to everybody?
Some people are asking if we can keep the same groups for create 2 in the chat, just to let you know.
Pauline's shaking her head no.
Work with new people. Do new ideas. You're going to get plenty of time in class, in person, next week to work together. It's not done virtually, so you don't need to worry about being near someone or meeting up outside of class. It's not needed. You'll get time in class while you're here. So you should start through the process and go through the process again with a new idea, a new partner.
So then we're not going to need to work on this create task at all before Monday.
No,
Other than brainstorming, no.
but they're not brainstorming with their partners. They're just brainstorming.
Yeah, because they're scheduled for elevator pitches Monday morning.
So tomorrow you'll pick partners. So over the weekend you can brainstorm with your partner.
Right, so you are working on brainstorming with your partner over the weekend. That could be through email, phone call, something like that. Touch base on Monday morning before you do your elevator pitch. But actually developing it should be done in class while you're here.
Okay. One thing I'm puzzled by with this, so this is my first look at this task, explore task. And one thing I'm puzzled by is why do they have to have a computational artifact at all for this? If the purpose is to do some research on a computing innovation and write it up and be able to distinguish beneficial and harmful impacts of it. I don't get it seems like a lot of what we're stumbling over is how computational is this artifact? And so far we've seen 3 examples, 2 of which were PDF documents. Plus the create task requires a video and a computer program. So there's plenty of computational artifact there. So honestly, I just don't get this entirely. It would seem to me a lot easier for us if this part was just write a series of answers to these prompts, and that be your submission.
Then it might not take 8 hours also.
Well, yeah, may not need 8 hours, but you know, if you really are doing a lot of research. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, just my own personal sense of things. So we'll resume this discussion on Monday. I think what we can see from this is what I saw in Kansas City, that this is going to be no easy task. And I'm hoping, Kristen, did you get any sense from the College Board whether anything would change with regard to the explore task at your institute? Is Kristen still there?
We have a hangout that we should have watched from the College Board as well.
Yeah, I did watch it. I did watch
They
it.
didn't say anything?
I don't know.
I'll watch part of it.
All right, well, we'll take it up again on Monday. So thank you, folks.
And the commentary is now linked into the agenda, so you can now see it. I didn't want to give it to you until you had actually tried it out, the grading for yourself, but it's there. You can take a look if you would like. So we'll see you tomorrow. I'm going to end the recording.
Have a good night. See you tomorrow.
See you.
Good night. See you tomorrow.
Have a good one. Take care.
Bye-bye.